Hi, I'm Kevin Frank. It is July 28th, 2020. Once again, I'm here with Dr. Jeff Andresen to provide a weather update. So, Jeff, hopefully you can give us some rainfall. We're a little bit dry here in mid-Michigan, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
and as well, there's quite a couple things to talk about, and water is not really one of those, but I'll explain here. But there have been some changes from what we talked about in the previous program, and I'm going to start here with my title slide here. This is an upper air forecast for next Monday morning, and for a lot of the growing season thus far, and we looked at this and we spent a lot of time with the upper air, and there's been a big ridge across North America, mostly across the central part of North America. And as long as that happens, you can almost guarantee the warmer than normal temperatures. And by and large, that's what we've had. But in the last few days, there has been the development of a trough. And initially, it looked like a relatively minor feature that would just move quickly through. We maybe have a frontal passage with it, and then after a day back to business as usual, which is we've seen humidity. Well, in this case, the guidance has progressively been much better developed, much larger feature here, and you can see instead of the ridge, we've got a big trough right over the Mississippi Valley and over the Great Lakes, and under these troughs, and almost in direct symmetrical opposite to the ridges, we typically have cool and unsettled weather is usually the case depending on where you are. Certainly cooler than normal temperatures, and so that is the very recent change that we're going to be talking about, not just in the near term, but also in the medium range. It's showing up now too. So how long it'll persist, this change, we don't know. You can use a little imagination here and look at that pattern and say, well, ultimately one thing happens, and probably this trough fills in or moves off, and once again the ridge comes back. And that's probably what will happen. That's where the money is right now, but it definitely is going to impact where we're going to be over the next week, maybe 2 weeks. Looking at last week, though, in review, given some unusual cool weather, winds off of Lake Superior for several days, you can see we actually had some below normal mean temperatures for the week in northern parts of the state. There were 3 days in a row late last week where the high temperatures in much of the Upper Peninsula didn't get it out of the 60s. And in contrast that, of course, with what we had down south, much different story here. And the averages reflect that. So they range from maybe a degree, possibly 2 degrees below normal in the UP to 3 or 4 degrees above normal in the south. So a big range, or much larger than we've seen a lot of this season. And a similar pattern with in reverse with precipitation, and this is probably more important as we look at our situation with water. But we had heavy precipitation and frequent precipitation across northern parts of the state. Some cases more than 5 inches fell over the UP and the extreme northern lower, contrasted with less than half an inch over large areas of central and southern lower. There were actually many areas, including here at my place in Hazlet, where we got, well, no measurable. I actually had a trace of rainfall yesterday in a system that I really felt more bullish about early, and it just fell apart as it came across the state. But I ended up with just a few sprinkles, and officially that goes as a 0 in the record books. But you can see here many areas, again, especially across that south central part of lower Michigan, where there was no rain the past week. And combined with the very, very high temperatures over the weekend, obviously lots of water demand. With the warm temperatures so far this season, this is no surprise. We're still in the same boat. Our degree day totals for the season are still significantly ahead of normal, several days to more than a calendar week, with larger departures in the northern part of the state. I also threw in here a seasonal precipitation total. This is percent of normal precipitation from the end of April through here recently, well, through the 26th. And you can see an interesting pattern across the Midwest. There's a lot of area in the Midwest that actually has fallen below normal, especially here to our south across the Ohio Valley. But large sections of the Great Lakes region, including northern lower Michigan and central and eastern UP and into Wisconsin, they've been the opposite. They've been much wetter than normal, and you can see the purples and blues here indicating that significant positive departures. But the area I want to focus on here is down here along, again, as we get closer to Indiana and Ohio. The southern couple tiers of counties on into the thumb, the southeast. This is truly the area where we have the largest, at least, departures from normal in terms of rainfall. Soils have a large impact on this, of course, too, depending on how much they hold. But that definitely is the heart of where the driest area in the state is. And as a result of that, the drought monitor, which is issued each week on Thursdays, last week's issuance is still at 38% of the state in dry conditions. But they did, for the first time, they put sections of the thumb and southeastern lower in the upgraded D1 moderate drought category. That's when it starts to get more serious. And then again, that was an upgrade. It was also, some of those areas had a little bit of precipitation, not that much, but and this reflects conditions almost a week old now. It takes a while to put this particular product together, but it's needless to say, both the amount of dryness in our part of the region and the magnitude of dryness are increasing with time. And given the forecast, unfortunately, we'll probably see more of that coming up in at least the next week, if not the next 2 weeks. One positive bit of news here in that regard, the evaporative demand drought index, or the EDI index, actually is backed off a little bit in terms, it's a little bit less severe over Michigan than it has been in recent weeks. But a lot of that's based on the potential evapotranspiration rates, which are not quite as high as they were earlier in the season. But still, to have D1 back in, that's the first time we've seen D1 moderate drought in Michigan since last year. In terms of our forecast, the cold front that went through yesterday, and actually more precip in the north with very little or none in the south, that's now off to our south and east. This is a map, surface forecast as of 2 p.m. this afternoon. You can see a couple more cold fronts here moving south and east, and that's really the next weather features that we'll deal with. First of all, this first one here, there's going to be enough residual moisture here and a little bit of an upper air disturbance to set off some scattered showers. We see a couple of those over in Wisconsin across the lake here right now, but I would look for an increase in coverage with that later on this afternoon and into the evening, and then persisting into tomorrow, especially across the southeastern lower. But it's not a widespread rain producer. Moisture it is a moisture-starved system, so it will be scattered at best. And if you're lucky enough to pick up one of those showers, you're probably only talking about 1/10 of an inch, couple tenths tops. So not a big rainfall producer, but it will be really our next chance for any precipitation across the state for several days. Beyond that, you can see another frontal system to go through. That one will come through dry with virtually no moisture. Here is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., and you can see the first front has almost made it to the Indiana and Ohio state line here, and then moving south and east. And then finally, on Thursday morning, high pressure here to our north, and then a lot of precipitation, stalled frontal boundaries to our south. And that's where we're going to be ending up for several days. Probably at least Thursday through Saturday, and I would throw in Sunday for most of the state. We'll be looking at fair and dry conditions, virtually no chance of rain. The other really noticeable, I think, outcome here, the air mass that we're dealing with is a modified Canadian air mass. It's not really cool, but it's definitely cooler than what we've had. It's also drier. So we will be, instead of having highs up into the mid and upper 80s or low 90s, we will be looking primarily at mid and upper 70s north to low 80s, maybe a couple mid 80s here by the weekend. Not too far away from the normal. Low temperatures generally in the 50s. So it'll be nice overnight sleeping weather and so forth, but relatively seasonable temperatures, but it will be dry. The next chance for rain after the next 24 hours here tonight into tomorrow morning, probably not until at least late, maybe on Sunday, possibly into Monday. And at this point, at least, the guidance is not suggesting that's going to be a major rain producer either. So we definitely are, given that upper air pattern where we started and the fact that it's hard to get moisture up here under that type of a upper air flow, we are dealing definitely with a drier than normal week, and maybe a little bit beyond that. In terms of precip totals here through next Tuesday morning, these are the forecast amounts. And again, it definitely drier than normal is the applicable phrase here. You can see a lot of precip to our south. And one thing we did talk about, somebody already asked me about this, what about the tropical storms and activity? Well, we have had definitely a pickup, increase in tropical activity in the Caribbean. It's just that the moisture, the residual from those systems, or at least the one tropical storm, actually Hurricane Hannah, which made landfall in Texas, it's basically been prevented from moving north. It's all been kept down in the Gulf. They had really heavy rain in Texas and parts of northern Mexico, but the system stayed there. There is another system very likely that will form in the Caribbean and maybe move up, but that one looks like it's going to make it up, probably threaten the East Coast, and it's really difficult to get moisture to the northwest once the system makes it up that far north. So that one very likely will not impact us either. And again, resulting here, or the result is essentially less than 1/4 inch for the entire week. So that's the bad news. We are, especially those areas that need water right now, we are likely not going to see much in the way of precip this week. On the positive side of the coin, there's always a couple ways of looking at this. Given the somewhat cooler temperatures that we have, even with sun, our potential evapotranspiration rates are at or maybe even a little bit below normally where they would be. Remember, we're right around it is climatologically the warmest time of the year and typically where we see some of the highest PET rates. But given the outlook and given some clouds during the afternoon here, at least our PET rates will not be excessive like they were back in June and earlier parts of July. So that's in the areas that are stressed, that should help a little bit, although it would certainly be preferable to get the water and would worry about the PET later, but we're going to have to wait a little bit for that. The medium range forecast guidance is consistent with that, again, that lead image that I showed you. This is the jet stream pattern for the 6 to 10 day time frame, which is right in the middle of the first week of August. And you can see that big troughing feature right here over the Great Lakes region. And no surprise, just we saw in Meteorology 101, underneath those troughs, you're going to get cooler than normal temperatures. And again, 3 or 4 days, this wasn't even on the map. So this has been a very recent development in the forecast guidance. And of course, we're closer to the fact. How long this pattern stays is still a debate, but probably, again, I suspect maybe at least a week of this pattern. Note also with that pattern that we've got drier than normal conditions. So this is at least a significant temporary change to the overall forecasting that we've talked about for several weeks now. So normal to below normal mean temperatures for this period and drier than normal conditions. The 8 to 14 day time frame actually calls for temperatures to moderate back to near or if not even above normal. And all the long lead outlooks still call for warmer than normal temperatures. It's just that we're looking at a deviation in that pattern for at least the first week of August, maybe a little bit longer than that. Oops. And finally, so just summarizing here, a pretty summer-like forecast, cooler temperatures with, of course, a chance for rain here over the next 24 hours. But beyond that, much of the rest of the work week should be dry and possibly even into early next week. Our temperature is going to be remaining at or maybe a degree or two below the long-term normals, but still pretty close to where the guidance or the climatology says we should be. And as you just saw, our medium range forecast is consistent with this recent change, or the change is taking place right now. And at least for the next week or week and a half, near to below normal, a little cooler than normal with drier than normal conditions. So the areas that need water, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer, I think, before we see any significant changes. And I'll wrap it up with that and see if there might be any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I think the cooler temperatures, everybody's probably a little bit happy about, especially as warm and humid as it has been recently. Unfortunately, no rain, though. But
no, and one thing that helps too, especially for, well, it's both annuals and perennials, but those overnight temperatures in the 50s, really, they give the plants a little bit of a break, especially if they are stressed out during the day and a little bit of a chance to recover. We even get a little bit of movement of water upward in the soil under those conditions, but I guess it could be a lot better forecast, but at least it's not for hot and dry.
Yeah, it is surprising that when one of those first slides you have, when you looked at the contrast between like this area of the state and then northern Michigan, their percentages of precip normal is quite dramatic.
Very, very different situation across the state. So I'm sure we have people from the north just saying, there's no issue here. We're trying to keep up with the mowing and forth. But of course, where we are and in the southern part of the state, it's become a very different story here over the last several weeks.
Yeah, for those of us that don't irrigate our lawn, we're just taking a little break from mowing right now. So it's not all bad,
Let the weeds do their thing.
Yeah, I guess. Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.